join me in a pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Norris will lead us in prayer.
Let us join hearts and pray. Heavenly Father, we are so blessed. We may be a little nervous. We may not understand everything. Of course we don't, but you do. So give us your wisdom and your humility and the peace that you bring to all of us in our heart. May that spread across our nation, in our land, and in our community. Remind us that we serve the people and help us to do it to our best ability. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you. Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Oliver. Here. Goss. Here. Dickinson. Here. Neal. Kirkpatrick.
Here.
Lowry. Here. Hammer.
Here.
Witcher. Here. Honeycutt. Here. Harris. Here. Gross. Here. Norris.
Here.
11 present.
Thank you. You have in your packet a copy of the minutes from the July 24th council meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? That being the case, do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Witcher, and a second.
Second.
Councilmember Gross. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the swearing in of 2 new police officers. Chief Howey, if you would introduce those 2 officers, please.
Mayor, Council, thank you. I'd like to introduce to you 2 of your new police officers, Crystal Pointer and Cameron Morrow. First of all, Crystal Pointer is from Cave City. He currently resides in Forest Cave. He's married to his wife, Christy, who is in the audience, and their 3 children, Miles, Allie, and Audrey. He graduated from Caverna High School, attended Western Kentucky University. He served 5 years active duty in the United States Marine Corps. He's currently in the Army Reserve. He graduated with a Fit for Duty Award and the Guidon Award. Cameron's from Adair County. He's 26 years old. He's married to his wife, Tracy. They have no children. He's a graduate of Adair County. He's also a graduate of Lindsey Wilson College and graduated with a bachelor's degree. I also believe he played some sort of linebacker for the football team. And he's received the Academic Achievement Award and Recruit of Distinction Award. A little bit more about Cameron. He's very dedicated to this. Shortly after he was hired, he got married, and then he went off for 23 weeks to the academy, so he was separated from his wife, but during that time, he lost 2 family members, and he was able to carry on and still receive the Award of Distinction. So, Officer Pointer and Officer Morrell.
Mayor, we'll stand up front, take the oath. We'll face the audience there. They'd much rather see you than me. So, if you would raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the Commonwealth, and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as I continue a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully execute to the best of my ability the position of police officer according to law. And I do further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, I, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within this state, nor out of it, nor have I sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have I acted as a second carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending, so help me God.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Officer Pointer's wife, Christy, will pin his badge on. And Mayor, Council, Officer Merle, badge will be pinned on by his first field training officer, Officer Fields.
Wish to thank you two and the rest of the police force and the work that you all do. Thank you for your service to this community. The next item on the agenda is approval of the policy change for the police department. Chief, you want to read that first?
There's no resolution.
Okay. Chief Howie is here and can address any questions that you might have concerning that policy change.
I'll just be real quick. If you'll remember, several months ago, you all approved an entire policy manual, and I told you that there would have to be some tweaking along the way. This is a tweaking along the way. It doesn't affect anybody's pay, it doesn't affect their job description. It's just the way the organizational structure of the police department will now be formed. And this meets the accreditation standards.
Any questions for Chief Howie on that policy change? That being the case, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Councilmember Norris, and second?
Second.
Councilmember Oliver. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I would like at this time to take the liberty here of rearranging the order of business here. We have with us Mr. Michael Scaff, who was with the consulting group that worked with the advisory committee that was put together for the electric plant board, and I feel like the information that he might present could be beneficial as we move into Mr. Basil's report. So if you would, Mr. Scaff, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I hand these out?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Michael Scaff. I'm a senior strategic consultant with TVA. I've been with TVA for 41 years. My role here was to sponsor this advisory group. We brought in John Sterling with the Smart Energy Power Alliance, a consulting group, who facilitated this process. I did not participate in the process per se, and when we finished with the process, I presented the recommendations from the Advisory Council to the Glasgow EPB Board, for which they approved all recommendations, and then I was asked to come and present these same recommendations or the same report to you. So I have in front of you actually the presentation we presented to Glasgow EPB, and for time I'll call that from this point on Glasgow. So So on July 19th, 2017, I presented these recommendations to the board, and I'll walk you through that. The first page, which is page 2, the process overview. We had 3 meetings of the council. We met on May 15th, June 15th, and June 27th. We had 7 council members in attendance for all meetings, and the process was facilitated by Smart Electric Power Alliance, John Sterling. I'll recap first meeting 1, where we discussed the basics of rate making. We received the feedback from the previous open house/survey process. We reviewed multiple different rate designs and what goals each seek to accomplish. We discussed ideas for consideration in Glasgow. And at that first meeting, we identified 2 preliminary recommendations. 1, the need to increase predictability, less uncertainty regarding how and when certain charges applied, and also a tiered customer charge or an inclining block for the customer charge as a way to mitigate rate shock for low-use customers. The council requested to hear more specifics and detail regarding rates TVA charges to Glasgow, the cost of service study process from TVA, and the rate proposal from the Kentucky Office of the Attorney General. The recap of meeting 2, we reviewed the rate charge by TVA to Glasgow, presentation from my kinds of TVA on the cost of service study process, presentations from Kentucky Office of General Counsel attorneys on the critical peak pricing rate, and general thoughts on rate design. We had an industrial perspective from James Gardner, who was the former chairman of the Kentucky Public Service Commission. General agreement by the council that a focus on education for different types of consumers would be pursued, how to save energy during events, and how to save energy in general. A preliminary agreement by the council on recommending a tiered customer charge, and desired expressed for additional time to consider what had been discussed. Given that, we came back for a 3rd meeting where we reviewed examples of theoretical bill impacts from different rate structures under consideration. And then the advisory group deliberated on the relative merits of different approaches to making rates more predictable, best method to create a tiered customer charge, variety of education-based initiatives to help promote energy efficiency and a better understanding of rate options for Glasgow customers. And we developed a list of recommendations to be provided back to Glasgow and TVA. So this gets us into the recommendations. The first section of recommendations is tiered customer charge based upon usage. The recommendations were for both rate options available to residential customers. The council recommended creating a tiered customer charge. Under this structure, customers would routinely low usage each month would have a lower customer charge than customers with routinely higher usage. The council recommends using a customer average use from the previous 12 months to determine which customer charge applies, and refreshing that analysis and the applicable rate charge annually. The next section of recommendations, revisions to infotricity rate and alternative rate. The council recommends limiting alert events to no more than 4 per calendar month. The council also recommends a target of event lengths of 4 to 5 hours, but no more than 6 hours in length. The council recommends that the peak demand charge apply to Glasgow System's peak demand that occurred during a called event hours only. The council also recommends Glasgow consider rebranding Infotricity, as the name has negative connotations for many in the community. The council recommends Glasgow seek customer input on changing the alternative rate from a flat rate option into a time of use option. Third section of recommendations, Roundup program and rate review. In an effort to provide additional support to customers needing financial assistance, the council recommends modifying the Roundup program to allow for voluntary routine donations in excess of rounding to the next highest dollar. Example, allowing a customer to select donating a set dollar amount per month toward the program. The council recommends that Glasgow conduct a review of any rate revision after 12 months in place to determine if any additional changes should be made, including a review of the critical peak pricing as an alternative. Under education initiatives, the council recommends a concerted effort to be put into consumers' outreach and education around ways to save energy. The suggestion topics for this initiative includes how to save during peak periods, general ways to save energy around the clock, specific information on how much energy different appliances use, and ways to save. The council identified multiple channels for the education initiatives, which include television, a simplified 101 version of energy efficiency tips, bill inserts or similar mailers, frequently asked questions material, print and online, town halls on energy efficiency, TVA's eScore website and program. The last grouping recommendation is still education initiatives continue. The council recommends identifying volunteers from the community who could be trained on ways to save energy and how to communicate them effectively. These volunteers could then attend various events in and around the town to provide useful information to others on how to positively impact their utility bill. The council recognizes that the rates are not one size fits all and recommends that rate comparisons be made readily available to customers so they can understand which rate option is right for them. The council suggests leveraging the Image West advertising program at Western Kentucky University to help create messaging and related material in support of the education initiative. And finally, the council expressed a strong desire that outreach and education efforts become an ongoing permanent initiative at Glasgow. That ends the recommendation from the Advisory Council. As an observer of this entire process, I commend the 7 members from the community that served on the council. The level of professionalism, engagement, and intensity was inspiring. They were all very professional. The community, I think, should be appreciative of that. One other observation, the 7 came in with different perspectives, as you can imagine. My observation of the process is that once these 7 individuals got in, heard the facts from subject matter experts, they were all pretty easily able to come to consensus. Not saying that everybody supported 100%, but it was probably what I call a model for a stakeholder review. They came in and they reached consensus. That ends my report, Mr. Mayor.
The next item on the agenda will be Mr. Danny Basil to address the council concerning the Glasgow election. Mr. Basil.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Alexander, Glasgow City Council, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this afternoon. As all of you are aware, I was, I guess in essence, commissioned a few months ago to look into the matter with the Board of Directors of the Glasgow Electric Plant Board, because as you all are aware, they are totally independent people, and that's the way a board is supposed to serve. And you have no control yourselves over the decisions that they make. They have to be made on their own in what they believe is the best interest of the city and the organization that they're serving. However, you have the power to appoint them and you have the power to remove them if you find that you're not satisfied with the process that's going on, and if there's a statutory basis to remove them. And that's where I came into the program a few months ago. As I started working onto the program, the advisory committee was formed that the gentleman from TVA spoke of, and it was informally discussed that we should wait and give them an opportunity to talk about and to discuss the issues that were important to the council and to the city, and see if those issues could be resolved, and it appears that they've made progress on one of those fronts. Now, one of the issues that was big to the public here, and probably the biggest to the public, was that rate structure. Obviously, neither I nor you know how to set up a rate structure for an electrical utility. As I've studied it, I've learned it's extremely complicated. But one of the things that I did find out from talking with Mr. Ray on the few occasions that we have talked is that alternative rate that's presently available is very close to what our rate was before Infotristy went into effect. It's just that a lot of people haven't used it, but the customer charge is much higher than it was back then. Originally, the customer charge was around $11, and today it's about $22. And that's going to get to the basis of a couple of points that I raised in the letter that I think all of you got at the last meeting to decide whether to authorize me to mail that letter on your behalf tonight. So I want to talk about some of those issues just a little. And I do want to also thank and extend our deepest regards to those people who worked on the advisory committee, because they did a good job and they were sincere, and I occasionally had input from them and occasionally had questions, and I always tried to answer those questions the best that I could when I did have those questions. They did a great job. Now, there was some issues that I thought was important and that I had raised with the council for the board of directors back in April, and we left that on the table till after the this advisory council had met, and those issues weren't, I think, specifically addressed by the advisory council. And one of those was the money that had been used over several years to help fund the broadband program and the cable program that was here in Glasgow, and it created a debt that still exists, and it was my recommendation that something be done to pay that debt, either a bond, a bank note, or something else, because that money should come back into the electrical side of the Electric Plant Board, because according to the Little TVA Act, which we function under, proceeds from electrical sales can only be used for rate reductions and can't be used for broadband or cable or other activities. So it was my recommendation that something be done to repay that money so that it would be available for rate reductions. Now, that $2.4 million would provide for a reduction of the customer charge on the households that we have now of $5 a month or $10 a month for 20 or 30 or 40 years. And that would put us about where we were, maybe a little bit higher, but not significantly higher than where we were before Infotristy was introduced. So if that money is repaid, and that was one of the main issues that I had raised, because I thought that was something that could be done and would help not only with the rate structure, but would help eliminate the potential of a problem on the ratepayer side. Now, I've set out the issues that I raised in this letter. The reason that I have done that is if we're going to have a hearing, we have to notify the other parties of every issue that will be discussed at the hearing. And we have to give them an opportunity to get their witnesses together and to have time to prepare for that hearing. And that is what this letter is about, is to tell them the issues that would be raised, One of them does deal with rate structure, but it's not to eliminate infotricity, because we think with the investment that the city has in infotricity, and there are enough people that like it, that it's here to stay, regardless of how you restructure it. And maybe it should be here to stay, because as you look at articles across the country and you become informed about changes in electricity, you find similar programs are being tried other places. It seems as though maybe we were the first and went the quickest. But what I'm saying that we need to do, and that's if you agree, is have that alternative rate, so if people don't want the infotricity, that they have an alternative that they can live with. And if we get the $2.5 million repaid, we can reduce the customer charge and have exactly that. And if it's going to be repaid anyway, I was proposing do a financing program somewhere, get it repaid now, and then repay that money to a lender somewhere, rather than piecemeal it over a period of time back to the electrical side. That was just my proposal. You're the council. If you have different proposals, certainly that would be more in order than my ideas. But the next step is, if you authorize me to send this letter, I will contact Mr. Cole, and we will see how much time he needs to prepare. We'll see if they're interested in compromising on these issues, and if they are, then there may not be a need to have a hearing. But if they're not interested in compromising on those issues, then if you want to have a hearing and you vote to have it, then authorize me to send the letter, and that's what we'll be setting up. And if you have questions, I'm here to answer any questions that you have. I think I can. If not, I'll get you an answer and provide it back in short order.
This would not preclude us from adding additional issues later, as long as we give them time to respond. Is that correct?
Would not preclude adding additional issues. Those are simply the ones that I listed with the research that I did that I thought were adequate, significant legal issues if you wanted to do a removal. Certainly anything else, if it's something that's more significant than these, maybe it should be put in instead of some of these. You don't want to have so many that there's just no way to get through them. So look at it in terms of, is there some of these issues that we should drop? Is there some we should substitute? But we can add any that the council wants to add.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and send the letter.
Have a motion. Second. And a second on the floor. Any discussion?
Make sure I understand. So if it votes to send the letter, there is a receiving of the letter, there's a time frame given in good faith to them, but there's still the possibility of some compromise and some discussion, because that to me is very important.
Absolutely. There's always that opportunity. Okay. And one of the requirements of procedural due process, which is necessary for this kind of hearing, is that they have full opportunity to know what the complaints are. They have full opportunity to present any witnesses on their behalf that they want to present to defend themselves, and that they have adequate time to prepare. And those issues will be worked out if we send the letter. The letter is telling them basically what the 5 issues are right now, or roughly 5 if you look at the letter. But if that is changed, all we have to do is give them time to prepare. And if it turns out that I have been wrong, which is possible in one or more of those issues, we can delete that issue and do it with fewer issues, or we can substitute an issue in place of it.
Hey, Bass, if I can ask a question.
Yes, sir.
Earlier you said they had done one of the 6 from the group that the advisory board, if I heard you right, you said they had done one of those electric plant board?
They have apparently made great progress on the rate structure, and I'm not sure that I totally understand what that progress is, but it sounds like they have made progress, and it sounds like they have identified some areas where they can make the rates more palatable. That is one of the issues that's in the letter, is rate structure, but the other issues really don't relate to rate structure.
Okay, but of the 6 that the advisory board recommended to the electric plant board, the only one that hasn't been, if I read in the paper, which I could be wrong too, all but one, and that one being the rate structure, has been agreed upon, if that's right.
I'm not sure it's been agreed upon completely, and if it has been, and it's consistent with what people feel is reasonable as an alternative structure, I'm perfectly happy with dropping that one, but I would want to know, and I'm not comfortable that it's at that stage right now, but it appears that they're willing to work toward that, and it may be that they have an alternative line that's better even than what I was hoping for, but what I wanted to do was if we could get the 2.4, 2.5 million returned, use that for customer service charge reductions.
Okay, and the 5 points, you said there were 5 points in the letter, and I know somebody gave me the letter the last time. You know I don't keep up with stuff very long. Can you just give me the quick 5 points, so, because I like to know what I'm fighting for or fighting against. What would be the 5 points?
Okay, one was the 2.4 million that that was proceeds from electrical sales that was used for broadband. Now, I may not be characterizing this exactly the way it unfolded, but as I understand, this happened over a period of many years, and it was determined as a result of the 2014 audit that there had been some commingling of funds. That's how it was categorized, and that there needed to be a repayment of that from the broadband cable side back to electrical sales side.
Okay, and that would be the 2.4 million.
Right,
okay.
right.
Are we pretty unique, I'm talking about the plant board as being an entity that's got a broadband cable side and electric? That may not even be a question for you, and it may be a question for TVA. Are we unique, or are there a lot of entities out there?
Well, I can tell you from what my investigation revealed, there are other places like us. They're not all like us, and there's other places where there's been funds commingled. Okay? Because it has happened somewhere else doesn't mean that it's okay, and of course that needs to be corrected, and that's one of the things that my position was, that I thought the board should be working on that rather than not working on that. Getting back to Patrick's question, one of the issues that I was wanting to see was that approval for bidding and competitive bidding, and that's 2 different issues, be made available on the internet, just simply so that the public and the press could see what was approved, when it was approved, and how it was bid. That's all set out by statute under the Model Procurement Code and under the little TVA Act, and I simply thought, and if the council disagrees, you can delete that issue, but I simply thought that in order to ensure that that was done properly, we should have it made available so that it was easy for the public to get it.
Right. And I agree with that. And I don't even know, do we do that through all the city agencies? Is everything put out on the internet of bidding?
That model procurement code, yes.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. And so that would be like number 2 and 3. And then
the rate structure was the other.
Okay.
And then the 2.4, that's 4 of the issues. And then the other issue was communications regarding issues for board meetings. We have, and I don't think there's anything wrong in sending out emails describing what's going to happen at board meetings and suggesting topics and suggesting facts and so forth. But I think that when the board considers those, it could be a violation of the open meetings law. Okay. And my position was I would like to see those made public. Mail them to anybody that wants them. Email them to anybody that wants them. Email them to the press. You don't have to stop doing them. Just make them public so that everybody knows why the vote's like it is and knows the discussion that's taking place. There's not anything wrong with sending it, but in considering it, in making your vote without discussing it before the public, it appears that that is an opportunity for the public to understand what's going on that's not been made available to them.
Okay.
And it would appear that there shouldn't be anything wrong with making that public.
I agree.
And what my position has been, and this is sort of a compromise, if we can accomplish these things for the citizens of Glasgow, the people that are on the board are good people. They're not bad people. But there are things that we would like to see improved. And these, if we can accomplish these things, maybe you don't need to have a hearing.
So if you got 2 bullets in your gun, you shoot it at 2.4 million commingling and the rate structure.
That's my first 2 that I had on my list, and
Okay.
that was what I thought. That was what I thought was most significant.
And the rate structure would be more geared toward the customer charge. If I heard you say Infotricity's probably here to stay, and maybe that's not exactly what that means, but the rate structure would be more customer charge than anything.
That was my position, and my position's not real powerful, okay?
But you're the attorney that's going to write the letter, so I want to make sure whatever your opinion is, then, you know what I'm saying?
I was of the opinion that if you took that 2.4, you could reduce that customer charge back down almost to where it was. And that is the biggest difference between the alternative rate structure that's offered even before the panel met. That's the biggest difference, because the actual kilowatt charge is very close, like maybe 1/3 of a cent higher than what it had been under previous rates.
Okay.
And there's a couple of flow-through charges that we get from TVA that we can't change. So if we could reduce the customer charge, that's going to help all of the people who are on limited income.
Now, and this may be for you or for Billy Ray, and this may be me not understanding, but was TVA okay with the $2.4 million commingling, or are we just not okay with it, or how would you describe that?
TVA wants to see it repaid, but they're not on fire to see that repaid. They were sort of involved in all the expenditures that led up to that situation, but at this point, because of the audit, I think, if I understand correctly, and I can't speak for TVA, but I think they're of the opinion that it ought to be repaid over some period of time, but they don't see a sense of urgency.
Right.
The sense of urgency, and I had not expected to explain this, but I shall, the sense of urgency that I saw was to avoid a ratepayer suit, which would involve assets of the city and the electric plant board that we might or might not win on. It would be complicated, but because those are funds that by law can only be used to reduce rates, if we could eliminate that potential, that was what I felt like. And again, that's my opinion. It may not be other people's opinion.
I've got a couple more questions. I'm just trying to get my head around this. Could there have been any equipment, and I don't know what makes up this $2.4 million. I can only convey it to my business. But there are things we bought that were shared within. Is this defined totally different broadband, cable, electric, or would this have been a truck that would have gone to fix your cable or fix your electric? Could that have been? I'm just asking.
I can only tell you my perception, and I'm happy to do that, but please don't quote me on this because I'm not qualified probably to answer that. But to the extent it might help, I'll tell you that this occurred over at least a 20-year period when broadband and cable was in its infancy.
Okay.
And it was like we've got one account, and we're running our business, and we've got 3 different things that we're doing.
Right.
So the income from broadband and cable went back into the pot, and so did the income from electrical. And again, I apologize if I miscategorized this, but as I understood it, that had accumulated over a period of time. And at the time, it's my understanding that TVA was aware of what was going on, but wasn't really aware either. Or maybe they were and said, this is okay, but then later when they looked at it, said, well, maybe we ought not do it this way. But it's not a cardinal sin with them, as I understand it. But my opinion was that we needed to correct that so that it didn't lead to further problems for the city and for the electric plant board.
Right. One last statement, and I'll shut up, I promise.
Anything you want to ask, I'll do my best.
I know. I'm all for everybody paying lower on everything. I would just make this comment to the council and to the group is, not that we couldn't, because if you know Washington, Republicans and Democrats both, it's horrendous. But I don't feel equipped as a city councilman, and some people may or may not, overriding a federal agency like TVA if they're good with it. I get why the essence of to try to lower the rates, but I would just say if this was my business, I would pause to say that this group of 12 people are going to regulate better than a federal agency like TVA would regulate. And that's just a statement, and you can comment to that, and then I'll shut up.
Well, I'll comment on it because I think you're inviting me to, and I think I probably should. It wasn't, and I have to be very frank to answer what you've mentioned. I was trying to be sure that we didn't have a class action lawsuit filed on behalf of electrical ratepayers saying, I have paid in money that was used for broadband, that was used for cable, and I don't have broadband and cable, and I want my money put back in on the electrical side so that it can be used for rate reductions. That was what I was trying to avoid. That's as succinct as I, and we weren't worried about TVA filing that suit. Okay? That's why that was an issue that I brought up and made that recommendation.
We've had some
Was the 2.4 million found during an audit process, or was it found during TVA?
It was in an audit in 2014, as I understand. It was not. It wasn't. It has been acknowledged by TVA and the Electric Plant Board, and there was an agreement done on it that came before the council, and the council rejected it. And I think there's no question that the debt exists.
I don't want to steal any thunder from Freddie as our EPB representative, but Brad, myself, and Marna were all present at the last EPB board meeting when the presentation was given by TVA about the group's recommendations, and then Mr. Ray and the board talked about what the plant board was going to incorporate. Freddie, as the EPB rep from the council, how do you feel that the board is doing as far as compromise on that? Can you speak to what they talked about that night? What changes they're going to make to InfoTricity?
Well, there was an agreement to proceed with the advisory council's recommendations one at a time. That's what I remember.
Okay. Do you want to speak to what changes they made that night?
Not really.
Okay. Does any of the council have, I know that, like I said, 4 of us were present. Are we all familiar with what changes they did agree to that evening? Or does anybody? In the paper.
I think all of the
I think all of the recommendations, with the exception of maybe one, which was a tiered customer charge based upon electric rate, was that correct, since you were there?
That was my recollection. I just thought maybe Freddie, being on the board, wanted to be the one to tell it, because I'm afraid that I would mess something up. I do know that we've limited to 4 peak days a month, that's all we can have, and that if they miss it, they miss it. It has to be one of those 4 days. I know the Roundup program was accepted. I know that the education, trying to do a better job of letting people know what was going to happen. I think I remember the board talking about sending out surveys to those people who have signed up for option B to see if they would be interested in time of usage charges. And then he spoke to the issues concerning a tiered customer rate, things regarding billing, the computer software, and also subsidizing different rate groups, if I'm correct, in terms of usage. But I think it was one of those meetings I walked out of, I can't speak for the others who were there, and felt positive that, you know, some compromise had been made, and to limit those 4 peak days where nobody has to have 8 or 9 peak days a month for those who have stayed on that rate was a step in the right direction.
I felt like the board was trying to make a positive move in the right direction, and, you know, I don't believe any of us up here are experts on the rate structure. I sure don't claim to be, and I've been to quite a few board meetings. I'm sure there's members of this council that's not even been to a board meeting, much less talk to a board member, and they're going to make a vote tonight on whether to send this letter or not, which, like I said, I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I don't think students are. So.
Were you at that meeting, Brad?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Councilman Gross.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall a statement being made that we need to raise rates again?
Say that again, Jay. I've had a hard time hearing you.
I said, do you recall a statement being made that they need to raise rates again?
Raise, if I don't quote me on this because I'm not too sure, it was about the customer charge on. I do remember something about that. I'm not going to say, but it was something on the customer charge on if they went to the tiered rating. I may be wrong on that. I mean, do you remember?
I remember something, and again, Freddie probably knows, or Myrna, somebody else may know more about this, that something was mentioned that in October of either this year or next year that TVA was going to look at their rate structure and would be putting out, and TVA people are here, so help me out here, I'm just a simple girl, was going to look at their rate structure and would be changing the way that they build the electric plant board and their other folks, which would cause us to reevaluate our current structure at that time. I don't remember it being specific that Glasgow Electric Plant Board was going to increase. I must be boring some, but that's the case. Sorry.
I think in October of 2018, and what my understanding is we as a city will become Infotricity similarly to the customers of EPB became Infotricity in 2016. So it's not going to be geared like we can do. It's going to be dictated by TVA and the power that's coming from TVA. That's my understanding, and TVA's here and they might be able to expound on that.
And Jake, also real quick, are you talking about when at the board meeting it was reported that because the EPB couldn't guarantee they picked the peak day, that they might have to add 25 to 30 cents to the coincident demand charge?
I think that's right.
And I think it was said at that meeting that if we add that, and we wouldn't do it before October or November, something again about TVA and their rate structure, that if we found at the end of the calendar year that customers had been overcharged on those peak days, that that money would be reimbursed to the customers. But that charge would only go on to the $10.80 or $11.20 1 hour a month. I don't think it was an across-the-board on-peak, off-peak hour. If I remember correctly, it was only applying to that 1 hour and then would be refunded if they were lucky enough to guess it right.
I think we've all waxed philosophic on this for a year and a half, and it's time to take some action. And at this time, I'd like to yield the floor to Councilperson Kirkpatrick to read a statement.
We've all had the opportunity to hear from Mr. Basil and read the findings and recommendations he is making, and it is apparent that there are reasons for concern. I appreciate the work Mr. Basil has done to bring these findings to us in a clear manner. Given this, it is my opinion that we need to pursue our legal option to allow a full hearing for these matters that will also allow those on the board to share their decisions and positions with us directly. I understand that if there is sufficient evidence, we can only make a formal decision regarding the board standing by way of a full and impartial hearing to determine if just cause exists for the removal of the board, as defined by KRS 92760 and as outlined in the Attorney General opinion in January 2017. The citizens we represent deserve a decision on this matter, and without a hearing, we are simply postponing making the decision. This has been going on for far too long. We need to finalize this one way or the other so we can all move forward as a community. For this reason, I make a motion that we schedule a hearing to allow us to hear arguments on both sides to bring this matter to a close.
Hey, Basil, first time in 35 years I've lied to you, but I want to ask one more question. I understand the reasoning between the $2.4 million, why that is a reason. Whether I agree with that or not, it's irrelevant. My question is, as a point of class action lawsuit, you've lived in Glasgow you've paid the last 40 years of your bills, as I have. So I'm going to pay that money in, but then you're going to turn around and give it back to somebody else. Would that, if you lower the rate structure, I'm not going to get the money I've paid in over 40 years, right?
Your customer charge would be reduced like everyone else's.
But it still would not, if that be true, if the commingling of funds was wrong, then the money I paid in over the last 40 years, would that not warrant the same class action lawsuit? Because I'll never get back those 40 years of payments I paid in. Is that right, wrong, or am I off base?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Okay. The issue is money that was paid for electrical sales can't be used for anything other than the sustenance of the electrical system, and if there's any excess funds from that, then it goes to rate reductions.
Right.
And can't be used for any other area.
And I get that, but if you and I have been paying in 40 years and Chastity moves into town and we each lower our rate structure $5 or $8, would there not be the same argument, whether it could be one or not, of a class action lawsuit against, from you and I that paid in 40 years, but we're only going to get back at $5 a month, versus her receiving the benefit? That's a question I'm just asking.
You could file that, but I don't think it would survive. But I think one on behalf of electrical ratepayers might.
Okay.
There's been a couple of class action lawsuits filed on behalf of ratepayers for water and sewer and some other things in the state, and that was the basis for my apprehension about this. Certainly those kinds of cases are actually a problem. And I don't know if you remember or not, but in the early 90s, I represented the homeowners in Glasgow in a class action lawsuit when the Electric Plant Board had a case against Comcast Cable. And I represented the homeowners over who owned the wiring in their homes. And we had 6 different subclasses, and we had a 6-day trial, and we won the case. So that all of the homeowners own the wiring in their homes because of that. And that was looked at all across the country because it was kind of a landmark case because we had 2 cable companies. In that particular case, Comcast had to pay my attorney fee, which was far too small. But those are the kinds of things that have grown out of proportion a lot since then.
Since you mentioned attorney fees real quick, I first of all want to thank you for how professional you've always been every time I've contacted you, and you've done a great job with explaining things to me and answering my questions. And as we look to move ahead with this, is where this is going with the sending of the letter and so forth, you know, being representatives of the taxpayers, we're getting pretty close to that $20,000. Are we going to be able to stay within that range, or are we looking, because in your letter you make mention of, you really want to, it says, I believe we can skip some of this and hopefully save many dollars and hours. And
It's my intent to stay within that, and I have done several hours and discussions that I did not charge for leading up to my last billing, which is up to date except for tonight, and I still have a few thousand left. So I think I have enough to go ahead and proceed to the end. It might not cover an appeal, but hopefully there wouldn't be one. But that's been my intention, and so far, I think we're on schedule.
Your Honor, let me make a point of order. We have two motions
Yes, we
on
do.
the floor.
I was going to address that in just a second. We need to disregard your motion at the moment, Ms. Kirkpatrick, and we have a motion and a second on the floor for sending the letter.
I'd like to call
the
question on that, on the first motion, the only one we are considering.
Can I speak at this point?
Is Councilman Oliver's call to question is really a motion to limit or cease debate, so we would need a second to that motion, and it's a non-debatable motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second.
To cease debate.
To cease debate, and to vote on the motion and second that we have on the table.
The first one would be the motion to cease the debate, yep.
So we need a vote, a motion and a second, need a vote for the ceasing of debate. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Roll call vote, please.
Harris,
Yes.
Honeycutt,
No.
Gross,
No.
Oliver,
Yes.
Witcher,
Yes.
Dickinson,
Yes.
Lowry,
No.
Hammer,
Yes.
Gauntz,
No.
Norris,
Yes.
Kirkpatrick.
Yes.
7 yes, 4 no.
The motion passes. We will cease debate on that. We now have on the floor a motion and a second. We have a motion and a second on the floor to authorize Mr. Basil to send his letter as written to the EPB's council.
Okay, can we talk now?
Can I ask a point of order?
Yes.
Can I ask that?
Point of order.
Yes, sir. And this would be, I was trying to get it done on the last one, and this is no disrespect to anybody, but Mr. Norris, I'm not sure he should be voting on this as well as a electric plant board board member. I would say that he should abstain, and he has the right to do that. I would also, as a point of order, because Councilman Dickinson, to my addition, 64 times voted that it was okay to commingle these funds during his tenure on the board, that he might have a conflict. So I would ask both of those, not that it's just going to change the vote because it's 7-4 or whatever, but just as a point of order, I would ask that. I don't know what you do with that from there, but I'd just lay it out there. They're elected officials and they can vote their conscience, and there's.
We have a roll call vote on this.
So we still can't talk?
Well, some of us can.
If you would, clerk, please call the roll.
Norris,
Yes.
Hammer,
Yes.
Witcher,
Yes.
Kirkpatrick,
Yes.
Gross,
No.
Gauntz,
No.
Harris,
Yes.
Dickinson,
Yes.
Oliver,
Yes.
Lowry,
No.
Honeycutt.
Yes.
Can we talk now?
You have to wait till the next. Now you talk about it. You should talk about anything else.
On the second motion on the floor,
Motion carries. Mr. Basil has been authorized to send that letter. Thank you, sir.
on Ms. Kirkpatrick's second motion, I second.
Now, Freddie, you may.
Help me. The
first motion was,
To send the letter.
Send the letter.
I'm sorry, your first.
Who's talking
on the
now?
second issue was now to proceed with.
A motion to schedule a hearing to allow us to hear arguments on both sides to bring this matter to a close.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes.
Who made the second on that? Okay. All right, thank you. Discussion with.
Okay, I think this advisory council work, which we have heard, was a very positive kind of thing. The TVA rep talked about, the people in charge of the survey talked about how positive it was. I'm going to vote no on this because I believe that we can still resolve this when good people get together and get their differences on the table. So I'm going to vote no on the hearing because I want to stay away from that.
I think we need to give people time to respond and see what will happen. I'm not ready to schedule a hearing. We may come up with more issues. We may be able to compromise and resolve every issue. Or what's left over may not be a critical issue to warrant removal of a board member. So I am against scheduling a hearing right now.
I guess I would like to defer to our lawyer here, Mr. Basil. Is it a wise move for us to, within 10 minutes of each other, vote to send a letter that allows due process and then turn around and schedule a hearing before we mail the letter?
I think what I try to do is make everyone's goals fit together as well as they possibly can. Within the letter is an opportunity for a hearing after I've met with Mr. Cole as a result of the letter. If you want to make it a hard and fast rule to have the hearing, that could be scheduled. I could still send the letter. We could simply schedule the hearing, but one of the requirements of procedural due process is that the other side know exactly what the allegations are and have a time to prepare. And if we set that hearing on a hard and fast rule right now, or a hard and fast day right now, we've got to go far enough into the future to guarantee that. And it might be that we could actually get the hearing scheduled sooner without having to go so far. But I understand the urgency, and I know that I've talked to people in the public that want to know why something hasn't already been done. Okay?
Absolutely.
So I understand her position completely.
I just want to make sure we're following all the rules, that we're doing it right.
It certainly is a reasonable option to be discussed, and that's what you're doing. And certainly if one or more of you want to have a hearing scheduled, I do what you tell me to.
So you're telling us from a legal standpoint it's perfectly fine to go ahead and schedule the hearing if that's what the majority chooses to do?
If you want to schedule that hearing, you can go ahead and schedule it. You have that power, and I'm at your will. Okay?
I'd like to thank the advisory committee and the work that the citizens did on that. And also, there has been some compromises made, but after voting yes on the last one, I would vote no on the current motion.
Can I make a motion to table this? And not considering it this time?
Yes, sir. Motion to lay it on the table takes precedence over the main motion. It's a non-debatable motion. It would require a majority vote for passage.
Did we have a second?
Well, no, do we have that motion?
I'll make that motion so that it could be brought back.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table this discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
And the motion carried. I'd like to apologize. I think Ms. Sherry Myers was here to address this group concerning this issue, and our elevator once again has failed. Our firefighters have been unable to get that working. Not that that's their expertise, but we thank you for trying that. And I apologize to Ms. Myers. She will have another opportunity to speak to this issue. The next next item on the agenda is a resolution approving the city's continued
Guarantee of the industrial development note for the spec building.
That whereas pursuant to Resolution 2254, which was adopted by the City of Glasgow on June 23, 2014, the City of Glasgow entered into a memorandum agreement dated September 30, 2014, whereby the City of Glasgow agreed to unconditionally guarantee the Glasgow-Barron County Industrial Development and Economic Authority loan with a local bank consortium when IDEA reacquired the spec building in the Highland Glen Industrial Park after the construction was completed. Whereas around July or August 2016, the City of Glasgow signed a guarantee agreement for the initial IDEA loan, and that loan is now up for renewal, and the city's continued guarantee is once again being requested. Now therefore be it hereby resolved by the City of Glasgow that the City of Glasgow once again execute a guarantee agreement for IDEA's loan renewal with the local bank consortium as it pertains to the spec building in the Highland Glen Industrial Park, and Mayor Dick Doty shall be authorized and directed to execute that agreement for and on behalf of the city.
Having heard the motion, the resolution read, do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Gross, and second by Councilmember Lowry. Any discussion?
Mayor, as our representative on the Industrial Development Authority, can you elaborate on this a little?
Yes, I can. This is really just a matter of reconfirmation, if you will. We voted back in 2014, if you remember, to act as the guarantor to this financing agreement that the IDEA board had for the spec building. It's time for them to renew that note, and so this is simply our confirmation of that resolution dated 2014 to act and back that agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an amendment to the interlocal agreement with the Industrial Economic Development Authority.
Mayor, I'm going to take the liberty of summarizing the joint resolution for the benefit of the council. There was a committee of both the county and the city that met a few weeks ago. Their recommendation to all governing bodies, the City of Glasgow, Park City, Cave City, and to the Barron County Fiscal Court, was to amend the interlocal agreement to provide for some very specific things. One, to bring Cave City on as a voting member. Two, to allow Park City to become what's called a non-voting liaison to the IDEA board. And three, to keep the legal name of the IDEA board, the Glasgow-Barron County Industrial Development and Economic Authority, but to provide for more of an inclusive strategy to authorize a doing business as the Barron County Economic Authority. And that was the consensus of that joint committee. This joint resolution provides for that. It's my understanding that Park City has already presented that to its governing body, and that's been adopted. I believe Cave City is considering this tonight, and the fiscal court will take that up at their next meeting. But this joint resolution would provide that the existing interlocal agreement would be amended again to bring Cave City on as a voting member. It would bring Park City on as a non-voting liaison to where they could attend the meetings and know what's going on. Three, allow the IDEA board to then operate under the assumed name of the Barron County Economic Authority. You have the proposed amended interlocal agreement, which is attached to this resolution, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I think it's easier to just kind of tell you about it rather than just read the entire resolution. Any questions?
I've got an issue I'd like to just point out. I'm not angry about it, but I think it needs to be looked at. Paragraph 3 sub E on page 3 of 10, the final sentence says the Secretary Treasurer, and Mayor, I believe that's the CEO, isn't it? Is that Mr. Iacone?
Yes, sir, it is.
Secretary Treasurer.
Yeah.
Shall transmit at least once quarterly a detailed report of all acts and doings of the authority to the bodies by whom the authority was created. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't get mine last quarter, nor the quarter before that, nor the quarter before that.
Make a note of that, and I'm sure that we can make those happen.
That was brought up at that meeting.
What?
And that was brought up at that meeting that it hadn't been done. And we got
Okay.
reassurance that would happen.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. You've heard a summary of that amendment. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Witcher, and a second?
Second.
Councilmember Kirkpatrick. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a municipal order appointing Brian Marr as the fire chief of the Glasgow Fire Department.
On order of the mayor, Brian Marr is hereby appointed as the fire chief of the Glasgow Fire Department, subject to the approval of the Glasgow City Council.
Having heard the order read, do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Gross, and a second?
Second.
Councilmember Norris. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll, at this time, administer the oath to Fire Chief Marr. So if you would, Mr. Marr, please come forward.
Would raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth, and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky, so long as I continue a citizen thereof, and that I will faithfully execute, to the best of my abilities, the position of fire chief according to law. And I do further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, I, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within this state, nor out of it, nor have I sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have I acted as a second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending, so help me God. Thank you very much. Congratulations, new fire chief.
Have a few quick announcements. Quilts of the Baron will be held Friday, August the 11th through Monday, August the 21st at the South Central Kentucky Cultural Center. This event is sponsored by the Quilting Friends Quilt Guild of Southern Kentucky. That is a free admission event. The Plaza Theater will be showing the movie Blue Hawaii starring Elvis Presley on Saturday, August the 19th at 7 p.m. Admission price is $2 per person. Leanne Womack with special guest Caitlin Smith will be performing at the Plaza Theater on Sunday, August the 27th at 7:30 to 10 p.m. Tickets are available at the Plaza. Those are $40 for the main floor and $30 for the balcony. Do we have any other announcements? That being the case, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. By Councilmember Kirkpatrick, and second?
Second.
Councilmember Oliver. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, John.